banana or some tomatoes to my costume.
Hello, everyone.
Hello. Hello.
Don't you think you should do the intro the same way? Greetings, citizens.
Greetings, space citizens.
Yeah, greetings.
What brings you all here today?
Do you have enough oxygen?
How are you doing out
That's
there?
cheesy.
I don't like that. I need better writers. Where do I get better writers? I don't know, Space Ghost. Maybe you should capture some.
Oh my gosh. So welcome to Dreamland, the Retro Blasting podcast. Today,
What?
I'm Melinda.
I'm not Melinda. I'm Aaron.
And today we are talking about Space Ghost Coast to Coast, one of my very favorite things from the 90s.
I know.
You
Same
know?
Same here.
So
that was an awkwardly placed I know. Again, I need better writers. What's happening?
So, Aaron, when was the first time you ever saw Space Ghost?
Oh, it would have been shortly after it came out. I just, the strange thing happened to Cartoon Network, where they started doing this Adult Swim kind of section, and I was up late.
But it wasn't called Adult Swim.
Right, but it was still happening later in the evenings, and I just was channel surfing, and it got to this show that sort of didn't seem on the surface to have a point. And it was like everything that I didn't like about Beavis and Butthead was going right on this show. I loved the timing of it. I loved the aesthetic of it. From the 60s Space Ghost look and feel to the humor, it was hard to explain how it hit in the 90s. It was sort of off-putting and risky and strange in a way that sort of made you uncomfortable. And it was a little darker than what I was used to seeing on TV. Everything was always so like shiny on the surface. And I think Space Ghost was like that. He was always so prim and proper, but there was always this undertone of just like, yeah, whatever did happen to Jan and the other guy, Jace.
And Blip.
Yeah, and one became a wheeled warrior. It's not true, is it? That's not true.
I mean, it could be. He would have to go back in time to do it, but
this is something Space Ghost can do.
Or maybe he did. He dropped off in the 80s because he was doing that, and that's why he's gone.
He got too big.
Let's do that.
At least we have an answer for one of them.
Right. Well, I have an answer for the other one, but it's coming later. So,
that's called foreshadowing. You've got better writers than I do.
What can I say? It's in my contract.
I should have fought harder.
I came across Space Ghost in this little apartment that I lived in Troy, Alabama.
What was he doing in there?
When it was like this creepy apartment, and I would stay up really late.
Is that why you picked it?
Well, I would stay up late at night. Yeah, I stayed up late at night because I was a little scared. I was. It was right across the woods.
You've got your microwave popcorn and your gun.
The back door, woods, and then a graveyard. But
that would be soothing.
And so, anyway, I would stay up all night long.
You know why? They're already dead.
I would watch Cartoon Planet all night long.
Mm-hmm.
And so I came across all kinds of weird stuff. And it had to be probably 96 by this point. Now, I think I was aware in 94, because 94 is when I graduated high school.
Mm-hmm.
And so 94 to 99 is the original run of Space Ghost Coast to Coast. And so it fits perfectly into my college years. Like, it's exactly my college years. And so when I think of Space Ghost Coast to Coast, it's college, and it's that little creepy apartment and staying up at 2 a.m. and just watching the insane crap that they would put out, because I think they just thought no one was watching except drunk or high college students like myself. Not that I was necessarily drunk or high, but I'm just saying.
Don't do drugs, kids.
So,
what are you thinking?
I want to give a little bit of background for Space Ghost, because I remember, like, in the 90s thinking, well, I've never seen the original show.
Right. I saw it a little bit growing up. It would, like, there would be reruns and things where it would come on. Yeah. So I was kind of vaguely familiar with Space Ghost, and I always did like his sort of, again, I liked his look. He was kind of this weird.
Do you like my look?
Yeah, your look is sharp.
Colors?
Yeah, I went pure, like, counterculture Gen X. Like, I need
just
to get
go all the way in
a Fender Stratocaster and start singing about And all the beers I ever drank are on a shelf above my bed.
Wow.
Man.
So Space Ghost originally aired in 1966, and I have some. For those of you who are listening to this as an audio podcast, you very refined folks, we also do this as a YouTube stream.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have slides. So if you want to see those slides, you can go over to my show notes where I will post them all after the stream.
Do we call those shoats?
Shoats.
Sorry, I just love Space Ghost. I don't think it's been all that
I'm
good
trying
for
to look
me.
at you like with Zorak
Yeah, with the
eyes, with the like. Okay. All right. So here is a slide. I'm going to take off our thing. So here is a slide of the original Space Ghost. Looks exactly like regular Space Ghost. He aired from September 66 to September of 67. And this show had two segments. It was Space Ghost and Dino Boy in the Lost Valley. And there were about 20 episodes of that show. It wasn't particularly successful, but it was created by Alex Toth. And, you know, he designed Space Ghost. He later said that he wasn't particularly fond of the design of Space Ghost. He kind of referred to him looking like an amoeba. And
the solid white outfit was something.
It was something.
And can you imagine if a real person, this goes back to your argument over some things just only work as cartoons. But if you were not like perfectly fit as a fella and put on just a solid white,
so like Buck Rogers,
there you go. That's a good, yeah. But I mean, at some point you're like, can I get a line to just sort of break this up or something with that? It would just be a little strange at first walking out on stage, but it would be a very bold and daring choice.
Yeah, white also has the fun advantage of it's often see-through.
That can happen as well. I don't think Space Ghost would have minded. Sometimes he's see-through.
Yeah, that's true. He is. Well, he actually, whoops, I gotta close this because it's driving me crazy. Wait, no, I can't. I got so many things open, you guys.
Close this.
So he had two teen sidekicks in this show, and I have to assume that much like later in life, like in the 80s when they would do all these different shows and put little kids in them, it was to draw kids into wanting to watch it. I don't really get that mentality.
We've stopped doing that now, right? Like we don't think
so.
that that's the on-ramp for a younger audience is to just add a kid sidekick.
I don't know.
Like now it's you add a Grogu.
Well, yeah, that's the other thing. So they did have the Grogu in this case, which was Blip the monkey. So they had the monkey and they had Jan and Jace. And most of the show was basically Jan and Jace getting kidnapped, and then Space Ghost would have to come and rescue them. So
who have you rescued this week?
Often Space Ghost was not the star of the episode in the sense that he wasn't really in the show until the end when you had to swoop in and save them from getting kidnapped by all these different villains.
Classic Ghost.
They had, of course, Zorak and Brak were definitely heavily featured. I say heavily. They were each in about 2 or 3 episodes of the show.
It was like they created everything they needed in that one run.
Yeah.
To just generate 11 seasons, give or take, right? Some of them are short and appeared in weird places of talk show. And I'm sure that you did a bunch of reading on that too, like how they accomplished that technically, what went into making that work. But
somewhat. So Brak and his brother Sisto were villains on there. There was the Black Widow, which they use occasionally. Lokar, Moltar, and Metallica all came from that original show. And Gary Owens was the voice of Space Ghost. And he also had a very bombastic superhero voice, which I can't do.
Who doesn't?
Me.
Meanwhile.
And so then the show got canceled. It was just kind of a...
What?
You know, kind of a show. And then in 1981, you have... the resurgence of Space Ghost with very minor changes. So this came about, and it was the Space Stars, and it was sort of one of those variety cartoon shows where they had a bunch, like they had the Herculoids, and they had a whole bunch of different other cartoons, and they would just play little segments to fill out their time, and you would watch these little 10 or 15 minute cartoon
kind of like Garbage Pail Kids. Like
Kind of.
little vignette kind of things.
And
that
I think it was
would mix
like,
and
was it
match.
Tiny Toons or some of those stuff
Yeah,
that were
they
way
would break
later.
it up into like these smaller, and there would be like a meta arc.
Garfield and Friends did it.
There
Yeah.
would be some things that carried over, sometimes jumping episodes, but you get the drift.
I do, sort of. So
they made
anyway,
it up as they went too. They
this
didn't always have hard and fast rules for how they did that.
This guy here that's in the orange on the sort of bottom left, he's got the sort of orange helmet and the orange pants.
I spotted him. He's by the dog.
Yeah, so in that series, Jan started dating him. His name is Kid Comet, and he was part of the Teen Force, which I have to think on some level possibly inspired the Aqua Teen Hunger Force, the name of that sort of little series. These were created characters that just...
It's kind of a non sequitur too on that show.
Yeah.
I definitely wanted to touch on that and several other shows that spawned from this. And everybody will have their favorite bouquet of shows that came from this, because if there's, and I think you've got a slide later that shows the sort of rudimentary mind map that I made. Everything, it's like a black hole. There's an event horizon around this show, and everything gets sucked into it.
6 Degrees of Space Ghost?
And just totally, it's like we owe like Space Ghost credit, or at least some responsibility, depending on whether or not you like the shows that I'm going to mention later, for those things even happening.
Right. Well, one of the things that they did change, this was an interesting aside to me. So the Phantom Cruiser did get redesigned in this 1981 Space Stars thing, and I'm going to show you both here.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's so interesting because you look at the 66 Phantom Cruiser,
and it's
so good. And doesn't it look like episode 1 of Star Wars?
Yes, it's got such a
actually episode 2, like with the
the silver,
all of the little the space gondolier and the space looking, all the type stuff.
Star Wars has some unfairly good ship design that still to this day, like when I imagine ships, I think in Star Wars a lot. But one of the other things I love about the 66 is that when I was a kid, remember those books in the library that you could get that showed you how to fold all these different kinds of paper airplanes? There was always that one about 2/3 of the way back. Well, okay, if you don't remember, there was always that one about 2/3 of the way back that looked kind of like that. And you were just like, man, I'll never be that good at origami. But like with the curved sort of thing, and you just knew that thing would fly for a mile if you could fold it. Every time you attempted it would just drop straight to the floor.
I think it's lovely, honestly. Like, I really think it's great. And this other one, it kind of has a Robotech look to it. To me. And that may be the color scheme, but there's just something about it.
Well, and like G.I. Joe, they kind of were fans of that sort of backward wing design too. And I think that was something that was just coming into vogue kind of in the early to mid 80s, is that the airplane designs that had sort of the backward looking wing on them. We've since moved away from that for probably many mathematical reasons, but you saw that in a lot of ship designs.
Mm-hmm. Well, so they had a whole new assortment of villains on this show. So not so much with Brak or
they're lost.
They had one that was Space Spectre, which was an evil version of Space Ghost from an alternate universe, kind of like Bizarro Superman, I guess.
Or like the alternate universes in Star Trek. It's like Bad Riker.
Right. The mirror universe.
Yeah.
And then Gary Owens was once again Space Ghost's voice. So he had 2 series at this point that he was well established as being the voice of Space Ghost. So not that there's any reason that I'm bringing that up at all. So let's skip forward to 1992 when Ted Turner founded...
If you slide into a KLF reference towards the end of this, I'm going to lose it. That's not fair.
I wish that I had done that kind of mind map.
You're getting numerologist on me, and I'm like, okay, add it together, carry the 2.
So Turner founded Cartoon Network, and he had gotten the rights to all of the cartoon libraries of MGM, Fleischer Studios, and Hanna-Barbera. So it was like something like 8,500 hours of animation. And, so what they were doing was they were like, well, we've got all these old cartoons. We can just put them on and make a channel, and it'll be Cartoon Network. And we're just going to show all these cartoons so we don't have to pay royalties. And certainly at night, they were doing that. So they had their programmers, like a year later, 93-ish, the VP of Programming and Production, Mike Lazzo, who we'll talk more about a little later, And the programming staffer, Andy Merrill, and a producer named Khaki Jones, I assume that's how you pronounce that, khaki, it's spelled just like the color, were working on ways to freshen up a show called Wacky Races. And one of the things that because what they were doing was they would take cartoons that existed and try to find new ways to creatively edit them or do things to them without having to pay animators to kind of freshen them up or make them funny or interesting to modern audiences, right? So
they would isolate the movements, and then they would use like an Avid editing station to.
Well, in this case, they were literally just putting like they were thinking, well, we'll turn Wacky Races into a Amazing Race type of thing. We'll just literally put them back to back and make it seem like they're going across the country, and it'll be like this big race across America, and we'll call it Wacky Races Coast to Coast. And while they're saying that, they had a TV playing in the background or something in the room, or Space Ghost came up in some way, and they were like, Space goes coast to coast. Yeah. So those two things kind of chunked in together. And that night, when Mike Lazzo went home and went to bed, he says he had like a fever dream of, space, because he loved Space Ghost, the original cartoon. And he was like, well, wouldn't it be cool if he was just like a talk show host? Because he was watching David Letterman before he went to sleep that night. And it was during, this was during the talk show wars, which I don't know if you guys remember the talk show wars.
I do. I just didn't care.
But David Letterman and Jay Leno were both vying to get the seat that was left open in '92 when Johnny Carson retired.
I definitely remember this. It was like Who Shot JR?
And I mean, it was such a big deal. Like, people were mad, and people had and it was almost
everybody
like
had their team.
The Cola Wars from the '80s. This was the new.
Thank you for not saying Team Jacob and Team Edward. That was very, very kind of you.
You're welcome.
I just said it so it didn't help.
But, there was this big thing about how Letterman and Leno hated each other, supposedly. And so it was this big thing. And if you weren't alive or old enough at that time to know about it, it was literally this thing that was in the media constantly. And so all those ideas were just percolating around in Mike's brain. And he woke up the next morning, he was like, Space Ghost could be a talk show host.
I like to think he just sort of went straight up in bed without bending. Just boonk.
I like that.
Space Ghost could be a talk show host.
I like that idea a lot. Well, so the next day he went to work and he talked to Andy Merrill, who you'll probably recognize was the voice of Brak later. And he sort of edited together like just sort of a test idea of what would this look like.
Proof of concept.
So they weren't doing any rotoscoping or fancy stuff at this point. He was literally just taking a tape, and this was literally like a VHS tape.
They had like one tape, apparently. Like everything was like their show Bible.
Well, because think about it, like if you've ever watched the series of Space Ghost and Dino Boy from the 60s, which is what they used, there aren't a lot of different takes of Space Ghost. Like, he's not in the show as much.
To try to limit the variety, because they would just, even then they were trying to conserve on animating costs. And
well, also Jan and Jace were mostly the ones in the show. And so he, they had all of it sort of condensed down on the tape. But anyway, so he was just dropping in chunks back and forth of like Space Ghost when he's talking from the show. And then they had this weird tape that was made of Denzel Washington doing a Q&A for a movie he was currently doing. Because remember, Ted Turner also was involved, like CNN here in Atlanta. The CNN studios were all there in the same building as Cartoon Network, which was really convenient. And so basically they would do
these tours, and they'd make
and
these
they would
packages.
Stop by, and record like they would have a recording suite there at CNN. And so the actors frequently were already there. So that's later.
And they'd have like a PA do the questions in these rooms.
Well, we haven't gotten to that yet.
Well, no, I'm talking about like Denzel, right?
Well, right,
So they would have a PA ask Denzel a bunch of questions, and then the way they would make these packages, or sometimes make these packages, is that way, and it's all one-sided. And then what they do is later they film their on-screen personality, whoever that happens to be, pretending to ask Denzel the questions. So there's already that mindset. Right.
What?
So you'd have some intern, right, from tech, just sort of like, hey, go ask him this list of questions. It's like, hey, Denzel, what did you think about this part of the movie? And
tell me about your character.
Yeah.
What was your favorite scene?
Stupid. Oh.
So anyway, they would have this tape, and so they were sort of cutting it back and forth, and that was enough to get them 5 episodes of the show. And so they get signed up, and so what they started doing was they I wanted to show you this before I move on to that. They were doing it this time because I said they were doing all kinds of crazy stuff to like
get to the plug
to freshen up older cartoons. Well, they did this thing, and I thought I was going crazy, but thanks to one of our patrons, I was able to find a clip on YouTube of they
patrons
used to
make
add,
us stronger.
They used to add in laugh tracks behind old cartoons and play them late at night, like at 1 or 2 a.m. So in my creepy apartment, I'm sitting there at like 1 or 2 a.m.
Awkwardly timed laugh tracks.
And they would be like these weird things. So I'm gonna play just an example of that, which they put with Space Ghost's original cartoons.
Free everyone! Get them aboard their ships!
Right. Come on, Blip.
You fools! You'll never outrun my space sharks!
We won't have to, Remora.
I just love it. Like I would just sit there at night and be like, I'm not on drugs, but I feel like I'm on drugs. Like it was.
So there are shows that came later from this,
Yeah.
like as this turned into William Street and other things, that I had that experience with, even in my adult life, where I would be sitting in my creepy old apartment, having just moved to Atlanta and watching the show that I won't say yet, and I'm just like, this is making me feel like I'm on something. Just because of what it's doing with timing and the non sequitur style of humor, where it's constantly hitting different parts of my cortex. Like I haven't thought about that word in 60 years. I'm very old, folks. Very old.
Yeah. So basically, I wanted to point out that because they didn't have any money, like they weren't really given any money to do this show, because Mike Lazzo was
how
like,
did they eat?
We really need to like have our own programming, you know, kind of like now Netflix wants to have all of its own programming. Well, back then it was like, we need to create our own show. So you have to use like the very few little elements that you have. And so Turner had the Hanna-Barbera catalog, but they didn't have the rights to the characters.
Mm-hmm.
So Hanna-Barbera would only consent to them using the forgettable ones, like the ones that no one gave a crap about.
They make some references to that in early shows, like in what was it, Batmantis, the episode. They say a legal term that I can't remember off the top of my head now. You just jarred my memory, where they were like, you know, Batman, and then he was like restricted. Like they said the thing that would keep them out of legal trouble, and they never showed Batman on screen. And I was like, they did that to poke fun at the lawyers who were trying to stop them from making this episode.
Well, because they were all about making fun of people and kind of
no, this was all 100% legitimate. This was all what you see is what you get. There's no subtext here.
So they edited, like I said, they did that whole Denzel thing. They sent it off initially to a big Hollywood production house to say, can you guys make this for us? Because they were like, well, we probably can't do it. We don't have the skill set or whatever. And what they got back was what you would imagine, homogenized Hollywood crap that's corporate and polished, and it stripped every bit of humor and uniqueness out of the magic that is Space Ghost. And so they were like, okay,
they got an advanced copy of Rise of Skywalker.
Ouch. So they chose Crawford Communications, which is Atlanta-based production company, to try to keep it close to home, less polished and whatever. And it's really lucky that they did, because that is where they ended up running into C. Martin Croker, who does the amazing voices of Moltar and Zorak, who we will talk a little bit more about later. But in terms of the production, just really quickly to your point, they did rotoscope all of the original 60s cartoons and sort of have these little limited runs of video, like of him moving like this.
Yeah, they would get like
going like this,
stems that they could use to build.
They would do like
longer
7
sets of action.
Yeah, 7 panels, like, and they were sort of hand animating it. And
then they would do sort of like you think with claymation, they would do mouth replacement and stuff, so they could actually do a better enough of like getting the different hard
things.
consonants, so they could at least get those in there. But sometimes they would do those wrong on purpose just to make it more jarring.
Well, much like South Park later, which is yet another show that's
well, you're never going to top the Canadian.
It's just like
Terrence and Phillips style, just.
it
bouncing
doesn't
heads.
matter. Like you just need to get it kind of an approximation. So they would basically place those characters on kind of like a transparency, and then they could do like any background they wanted. And then the shows were scripted and recorded first and then animated. So they would have the interview done, and to sort of like what you said, they would have they went through different phases of how they did the interviews. I know.
Oh yeah, like initially the people didn't know what was about to happen to the interview.
Well, yeah, because they'd never seen the show. It was brand new. And so it was like,
or in some cases like Denzel, they had pre-recorded it. And so it wasn't even part of his original agreement that it was going to be used.
Well, that's why that's not in the show, but like
it's in the list, but you don't really see it.
So they would have like initially, I think they had sort of a student, like you said, from Georgia Tech, dress up in a Space Ghost costume and sit there in the room with the guests and interview them and ask them this list of questions that were written by the writers.
Yeah.
But
it was like
the people would laugh so hard.
What superpower do you have? You know, it was just there wasn't a lot of emoting or acting happening on that side of the conversation.
Right. Well, so the Bee Gees, for example.
Oh, that one.
They laughed so hard because of that you could really only have a few seconds of their interview because they were laughing at the guy who was in the costume.
They call back to that later. He was like, Zoltar, he's the one who scheduled those terrible Bee Gees. You know?
But he called them Bee Gees.
Yeah. He did?
He
I
did.
heard Bee Gees. My brain auto-corrected. It's like happening in my head now.
Yeah. Yep. He can't even be bothered to say their band name right. So, you know, they were doing all of this and they would have the interview sort of scripted and recorded. Then they would take it back and sit around a table. There are a few episodes. So this show is now on HBO Max and you can go in and watch. And there's like a whole episode of a table read of them sort of sitting around going through, like they already have the interview footage, the clips that they want to kind of pull out from the interview. And they have like one person reading, like in this case, it'll be Conan O'Brien. And then they would have the rest of the script that they then build after the fact. And so they kind of write based on what they can pull out of that interview. And so frequently, as you might expect, the questions that were actually asked to that person are not what they show on the show.
They would change it up to make the answers seem either funnier or more embarrassing to the guests, or spin off in weird directions.
And so Michael and I, when we're watching, it's like, how did they do this? And did the people know? And so there's a great little chunk of a clip that I'm going to play a very small part of right now. That's the Conan interview clip, so that you can get an idea of like how not funny the original interview actually is.
Yeah, because contrary to popular belief, Conan is not very funny.
Okay.
Joking.
My director Moltar is an evil pyromaniac. He wants to know if things are funnier when they're engulfed in flames.
Usually it's true when something's on fire, it's much funnier. So on that count, Moltar, you're very right. If a puppet's on fire, it's much funnier than a puppet that isn't on fire. The only thing that's not funny when it's on fire is diced fruit.
I'll say this. One of the things that I walked away from that appreciating a lot from Conan's interview, and I know I just made a jab at him for not being funny, but that's his style. He has such good control over his face, and he just sort of emanates confidence. So I did get the feeling in that interview that he was not fully invested. And he was just sort of playing it as he went, just kind of passing the time. But when he committed to a bit, it was actually pretty impressive to see that he could deliver these sort of really absurd and sometimes really offensive ideas, but he would just always have that talk show kind of demeanor about him and eye emotes and things like that. So that's I just said something negative about Conan. Now I'm going to say something positive that I like about him.
You doing a little compliment sandwich there?
Nope. That's gross.
It is gross.
Thanks for grossing. Why you gross? Is it good coffee? Is the coffee good?
It is, actually. It's delightful.
I made it.
Thank you.
Yesterday.
Tastes like it.
Morning.
So I'm just going to leave all that Conan stuff alone.
No, actually, really, I talked myself into a corner. I do think he's fairly funny, but in that interview, he was very dry.
Yeah,
and the energy level was not what you're used to on his talk show.
Well, in the later years. So that was like season
The
4 or
later
5 or
years.
something like that of Space Ghost. So by then he definitely knew what he was getting into in terms of like having seen the show and stuff like that.
And he continued to collaborate with them where he
I think
could.
he
Like,
was fine with their
Triumph,
style.
the Insult Comic Dog, kind of showed back up a couple of times for a
really,
wild,
really upsetting.
wild episode.
Yeah.
That made me realize that it was time to punch out. Space Ghost, it's time to punch out. You punch the clock. You've done it.
You're done. So, okay, let's talk about the first 2 seasons of Space Ghost, because those are the 2 seasons that
Please
he
do.
really talks a lot about or focuses on a talk show type of thing. Now, I think that it's important too to kind of when we're talking about Space Ghost and why it's important, whether you like the show or not, to recognize that it was doing something somewhat subversive. And
Like
you
all
know,
good television.
people think of things like postmodern theory and things like that as being some academic elite group of people sitting around talking about theories, but the
Anytime
people
you
who
put the word post in front of something, you instantly sound like you're trying to convince people you went to Harvard.
but the people
Unless it's post hole digger. That doesn't do that.
the people who actually do postmodern stuff, like the KLF, are a great example of sort of a postmodern take on the music industry. So this is like a postmodern take on cartoons and animation and talk shows and television and pop culture media in general of the 90s. And they're kind of making a statement, but like these folks weren't necessarily like college educated, like doing it with that intention, but they still had the instinct. So it's not really something that's hard to access, but I do think that it's important to understand it. So I kind of made a quick slide just to kind of help sort of clarify. If you're not sure what people mean when they say postmodern, it's kind of a complex theory, but I'm going to boil it down and condense it.
Thank you.
If you think about modernism, and this is a very stripped down thing, it's much more complex than this, but let's just say modernism, which is sort of like starts at the First World War and goes through about the 60s, 50s or 60s. And then where it picks up is postmodernism. And, now we're in postmodernism, but the 60s to about 2000 to 2010, somewhere in there, it's not a really defined time period, is kind of what we're talking about.
I hope it gets a new name and we don't just keep putting post in front of it forever.
So modernism is things exist. We use logic to learn things. Science and technology are great. Order.
It's not on
like
there.
I know, but I'm just explaining. So
Okay.
Superman is all about like he follows like very sensible rules.
Another person who isn't very
understandable.
funny is Superman.
So postmodernism is like, nope, everybody has their own personal reality. No one can know anything. No one can really, you can't believe in anything. You can't understand anything. It's all subjective. There's no meaning to anything. If you're trying to tell me that anything is real, I'm just going to argue it with you. And skepticism and mockery of everything is the way to go. And, I think postmodernism is fun when it starts, and then it descends into utter chaos, because it is kind of
It goes up its own butt eventually.
It really does, and it's really obnoxious.
And everything taken to an extreme. I mean, it's probably why postmodernism started happening, is because modernism just got too entrenched. And so the next generation came along and that generation had its boomers, and it just sort of went its own way.
Yeah.
So it made fun of that modernism. And now we started making fun of the modernism. And it's getting very confusing very quickly for me.
Yeah, it is. Well, and
you were talking about what that was. You did you found some traits for what the new postmodernism movement is, which I thought were interesting. But you don't, so that's fine.
No, I do. I wanted you to sort of describe it.
Okay, well, I'm not an expert on this, but I would say that what I am observing right now is something that I think we deal with a lot on this channel, which is this sort of sense of, I can't really tell you what the things are because it's still early in my brain to try to write this down. But some of the symptoms of it that I see are why Twitch streaming is so popular and so effective. It's why TikTok is so loved. It's this sort of obsession with bite-size, authentic, real experiences, which, if you just take that on its surface, what's wrong with having an authentic experience? it's sort of that hyper focusing on the appearance of being authentic, or sort of creation of inside baseball around the process of doing things like that. So you end up with these hyper stylized YouTube channels and Twitch streams that have all of the, you notice how it's all homogenizing and everybody just has the same sort of frames around and it's got the same sort of look and feel to how everything works. So it is defining
Cornflower blue backgrounds.
I mean, that was, but see, that came from what, modernism, or is that postmodern? Where
That's
cornflower
just
blue would have been,
corporations is what that
but
is.
that started in the 90s, like Windows, you know, Bill Gates was like, everything is this light blue, everything is this gray.
I think a lot of that comes from focus groups. So I feel like postmodernism or transmodernism, as some people have.
I like that better rather than like
proposed.
post squared.
There, if you go to Wikipedia and you type in postmodernism, you will find sort of a synopsis
You
of
crash the internet.
several of the different leading theories right now about
Is it focus grouping
what it
kind
is.
of in
well, this is just my hot take.
that? Oh yeah.
My Melinda's hot take, which means really nothing, but
Melinda's hot take.
it's very authentic though, you guys. I think that things are moving toward
I need
this
a
type
break.
of speak that I actually want to do a whole podcast about, which is like, you know, corporate speak really starts hard and heavy in, I think in the 70s, but definitely in the 80s, you get like all of these like gurus
Yeah, and they
that
all
start
have their own
speaking to
imprinting.
corporate groups, and then they start like having all of these ideas where
I got the
all
ton
of the
rebels.
employees of a certain company all kind of have the same brainwashing and messaging and branding, and you're now you have a personal brand, and it's sort of all this weird culty language that gets sort of pulled into corporate speak, and how that affects and plays with things in the human brain. And because we're such social creatures and we're wired to be successful at being social, what that does to us.
I think it's hacking. Honestly, I think we don't really think a lot in terms of neurological and biological hacking. To some degree, we are more familiar with the biological side with like the CRISPR innovations and the fact that they're using RNA to sort of rewrite certain parts of our genes to accomplish things. Sometimes it's really scary. Sometimes it's really necessary, like fighting things like COVID. But the neurological hack is something that's still kind of kept, I think, under wraps a little bit. And I think that's because it's intended to be sneaky. And our television, our shows, a lot of our cultural sort of entertainment has been doing it for decades. Like
putting the cult in culture.
It's always been there. But then I think where a lot of these gurus started springing up is they realized that they could apply some of these imprinting techniques and some of these kind of brain hacking techniques to the corporate culture and try to min-max performance and get a lot more out of people than they necessarily would in their, however they came to the organization. So yeah, I think there's a ton of ground to cover on that topic.
Yeah.
So our little digression into corporate speak.
That's right. So bringing it back to Space Ghost, Aaron, what was your favorite episode? I'm gonna break my own rule and ask you that lame question. What was your favorite episode?
It's a toss-up for me. I picked 3. And they're favorites for different reasons. So, and if they overlap with yours, do you want me to just pick one of them and then
no,
not
talk
do all
about
3?
all of them? I don't care. I don't have any picked out in my brain. So
when I thought about this, I anticipated you breaking your own rule. I really loved Bat Mantis because I loved the interactions that they pulled together with Lee Merriweather and Eartha Kitt. I just thought they were like liquid dynamite on the show. Just their personality came through and how different they were. And then they got into these really awkward discussions about like who each one thought was the best Catwoman. And it wasn't even somebody who was on, like, it just really embodied everything that show did really well, which is I'm going to make this awkward. And both of the guests, those 2 guests, were really good at just playing with that and running with it and complimenting the other Catwoman actors. And then Adam West was just sort of seemed lost, like he got shoved into the middle of it. And he was good, but he seemed to have his agenda. And it's like they told him, pitch your book. They told him to pitch his book really hard or something because he kept going back to his like, oh, I'll tell you about how I did this back in the day. The other one I really liked was Banjo.
Does that give you the cringe?
Which part?
Like when, like, say Adam West is trying to like promote his book and they just keep talking over him.
It gives me the cringe only if I think that Adam didn't know that this was going to happen and that in some way they're taking advantage of him,
And that's what
and
I
his
think.
ignorance.
I think
That
that's
makes
what
me feel
Michael
kinda
is
bad.
trying to figure out when he kept sitting. Because when Michael watches this with me, this is way too postmodern for Michael to really get into, and so he's watching it with me, going,
It's-
what are they doing? Like, and I think it's because he's worried that they're kind of putting these celebrities. Sometimes you feel bad for them, sometimes you don't, but I definitely wonder. Like, it's curious. Like,
I didn't wonder with Eartha Kitt and Lee Merriweather. I didn't. I felt like they were in control of their interviews. There were some other episodes that I didn't mention where the guests seemed like they were too drunk to have been filmed. And I felt really bad for them, even though I think that was their shtick, but it feels like they leaned into it a little further than they would like to have seen themselves lean into it now. And it was embarrassing. With Adam, he's always been hard to read. I don't feel bad for him because he's continued to build, he continued to build a brand with laughing at himself, being postmodern about who his character was in later years. So you get the feeling that he may have been more self-aware that some of this stuff was going on as time passed, and he's talked at length about that. The other thing that I think later guests would have known from Space Ghost, because they would have seen it, is that Space Ghost is always going to poop all over your whatever you're pitching, whatever you brought onto the show. That's like part of the shtick. And later on, Osmond kind of goes into that. It's like, you're not going to get me, and then he gets him anyway.
see, that would have been on my list, because I feel like, as much as Donny Osmond is not like my favorite person or anything, not that I have anything against him, I just wouldn't have.
Match on that one.
Oh my God, he gave it just as good as he got. Like, he really gave it back to them.
You couldn't tell if he was really getting mad, but then he would pull it back, and you'd be like, oh, he's doing that thing
pro
called acting.
I love that guy.
Now.
He did a great job. And then of course, Bobcat Goldthwait is just, to me, always fun. So I love seeing him.
I didn't go back and watch that one. Did he do it in character, or did he do it as himself?
Himself.
See, I don't remember when he started making public appearances without doing his.
He always has a little bit of that overtone, but this was the 90s, so he was slipping out of that. And
heading towards his producer director.
Judy Tenuta, who I had totally forgotten existed, was actually really funny on there. I thought she was just bizarre enough with her act to fit in nicely with the bizarreness of the show. And who was the other person that I thought of? Oh crap! Oh, okay, so wait, there was this guy. Yeah. I can't remember his name. So it's
keep describing it. Let me see if I can.
He's the guy who's not anybody, but he was like one of the people who worked on the show's dad, and he's a hardware store owner from somewhere here in Georgia, and he has the very southern accent. He's just like an old guy, and he literally owns a hardware store.
And they got him to come on,
and they got him to come on the show, and I just want to see a whole show of that guy. Like he had a.
That touches on something that I want to get into later. I don't want to walk away from the Donny Osmond one because I feel like he upstaged David Byrne hard.
I feel like he did too.
But the thing about that is as subtle and understated as David Byrne's interview was, I really liked how awkward it was and how weird it was. I feel like if they had paired him with one of the weaker interviews, it would have he would have been the star of that episode. But Donny Osmond, I think he's who he is because he figured out how to get into any situation and be the most important, interesting person in the room. Mm-hmm. And he's self-referential. When he was talking about his fist fight, I thought that was great. Like just the way he kept insisting that, I won that fight. And he's just like,
I loved it.
I couldn't tell if it really mattered to him.
I don't even care. I was so excited to see him just owning that interview process.
And the last one is Banjo. I got to call it Banjo.
Oh my God, Banjo is so great.
Why do we always hurt the ones we love? It was so over the top.
I kind of fall in love with the whole concept of Banjo. And
here's my super vitamins. Mm-hmm. I was like, oh, this isn't going to go anywhere. Good.
Yeah, I liked it way better than the Boo Boo Kitty thing,
well,
of course.
I didn't go catch that one. So.
I mean, that's a little later, but poor Boo Boo Kitty. That's all I can say. But yeah, I really... So all of these are great examples of the postmodern take. So what they're doing is sort of subverting the dominant paradigm, right? They're taking talk shows, which are such like late night talk shows, as these things that are like super superficial and just pandery. Like, I'm just gonna kiss the butt of the celebrity that's on my show.
Oh, who's that guy who was from Saturday Night Live who's doing them now? His move is to laugh at everything until you
Seth
laugh at
Rogen?
him. That's not Seth Rogen. I can't remember
I
his
don't know.
name. I don't watch late night talk shows anymore. Ever.
Well, they're so formulaic and they're so pre-scripted. So every story that the celebrity is
I watched Jon
asked
Stewart.
about, every
I feel-
question, it's all pre-planned,
Mhm.
and they have to, the actor or actress or whoever it is approving, their people are approving this
Mhm.
thing so to make sure it's on brand for the celebrity. It's so not this. Like
It's packaged and air conditioned and flavor measured and everything.
it's corporate as crap.
Which is, I think, why this new modernism or new postmodernism or what you called it is starting to happen, is because it is a backlash of
It's
that
a pendulum
overly
swinging back the other way.
focus grouped interviews. Like, people want to see people like flub a line and be scratchy around the edges, and the problem is that it's like it's just going too far.
Which is why all these celebrities are now migrating over here to YouTube, where
and just
we now
being
get to
themselves.
compete with celebrities.
Yeah, we were looking the other day at some of the celebrities who were starting podcasts. We were like,
Well, like Pippin and Mary from
right,
are having a podcast. I'm like, well, I mean, it's hard enough to get a podcast off the ground these days since everyone's in the pool.
yes.
Like, let's add some celebrities in there so that none of us can
Macaulay
get ahead.
Culkin has a podcast now.
Well, he's had a podcast for a while. But,
Yes, he has. He's also genuinely funny.
He is.
So
really
I'm not
enjoy
mad
him.
that these people are
I'm not
doing
mad either. I just think it's interesting, and I feel like it's a very specific move that they're doing. But this show, Space Ghost, is doing these things to comment on, which is the postmodernism, right? It's sort of a hot take on, what's going on. So we're talking about like Zorak hates Space Ghost instead of being like the band leader who's constantly sucking up to the host. Like if you watch David Letterman from back in the 90s, and you had what's his name?
It's kind
Paul
of a sycophantic.
Schaefer. He's such a yes man, a yes boss. Like it's that, and it's like. That's not as interesting as seeing Zorak hate Space Ghost, or they're so on late night. Normally they're so like catering to the guests, red carpet rolling out. And it's the exact opposite on this, to show celebrities are not the be all end all. Why do we have to like aggrandize celebrity? So we're not going to kiss the butts of the people who are coming on here because they're not better than any of us. So it's a commentary, a social satire, if you will.
Well, you've got Space Ghost, who is like this giant of a character, like an inhumanly amazing person who can shoot laser beams out of his arms and disappear at will and rescue people. So he can talk down to anyone that comes on his show, except for Osmond.
And then it's going to make everyone who's watching potentially feel very awkward, much like Michael did, much like I even kind of do. When you're seeing something like where you feel bad for the celebrity, and the reason you feel bad for them is because you're buying into the social construct that we all have to kiss the butts of celebrities because they're celebrities. And Space Ghost is asking you to question, but do we have to kiss the butts of celebrities? Like, why do we have to? And it's challenging that on a KLF level of like being, oh my God, like, do we really have, what is money? Like, why do we have to care about this $1 million? Are we going to set it on fire?
Whoa.
It's making me feel uncomfortable.
Slow down, partner.
But why does it make you feel uncomfortable? Get down, like go do therapy, go down into the deeper and deeper into the well of why it matters to you.
I think we've lost you. No, but you make a good point. Some celebrities came on and held their own. And so it was a proving ground for many people to get on there and be who they really, and like show that is who they authentically, they can generate that personality that we love from the show or the music or whatever, and be the person that we already liked. And they just proved that. And then there's some people who come on and you realize how much of a facade who they are in public really is. And that's where it gets really weird.
I feel like they're harder on those people. I feel like the people who don't do the pre-research, they don't have any idea what the show is about because they're all about themselves and they're just, I need to promote my book.
Yeah.
Look at my book. And they're just constantly trying to do it. Those are the people that they really don't even put their interview on the screen. Like it's just,
or you see them sit there for 2 seconds and then they just cut to another bit. And it's like they were a credited guest and they don't even get a line.
They don't even get a line.
It's amazing when that stuff happens.
Hilarious.
Sometimes it's depressing. Sometimes I was looking forward to what those people would say, but
yeah. but they might not have said anything all that interesting either. So, and then some people just don't have a sense of humor. Like Alice Cooper surprised me in a way that he was just like kind of cantankerous when he was on there.
That
so.
surprised you?
Kind of. I mean,
Think about the time
think about
period.
what I know, but think about what Alice Cooper does for a living. Like, let's keep it real.
No,
Like,
but that he was in a different place in his career at that point. And
I
he was
suppose.
rubbing elbows with like the TBN crowd. He was going down a different path for a little bit.
Yeah. Well, so I don't know, where as the show sort of like goes out of season.
I know where you're going with this a little
Do
bit.
you?
I'm going to guess, and you can say that's wrong.
Okay.
That's fine with me.
Fun.
So there was something that I wanted to point out in later seasons of this show. I went and checked some of those out to sort of bookend it and see where things ended up at the very end. This would have been a time when they had all the approvals. They were already sort of the thing that spawned Cartoon Network and William Street and so many other shows. They were sort of the granddaddy of all this. So they got everything at that point. They had better animation. They had better writers. They had bigger studio. They had all this stuff going for them. And I found that the shows fell flat. Like they leaned into all their sticks so hard and they synthesized them to the point where they were generating upsetting content. They were subverting the paradigm like a pro, like they were being paid to do it. And what I wanted to point out here is that this show was doing its best work when they didn't have that, when they were working out of people's garages, when they were using the parents of people to provide voices, and they were just getting what they had sitting on the shelves around them to get this thing done. It's another example of how the limits that are put onto something can create a much better product than if they could just ask for whatever they wanted and didn't have to like worry about how much it cost.
I cannot agree with you more.
That's where I thought you were going.
No, I mean I wasn't, but
Dad, got it.
but I was eventually.
Why?
So I absolutely think that that's one of the biggest takeaways is these early seasons where they really had to scrape and scrap. Like these guys were programmers. So during the day they go to their 9-to-5 job and they're programming. They're putting together the schedule for the day at Cartoon Network.
Mm-hmm.
They're working with what they've got. And then as soon as 5 o'clock comes, they all stay at work. Everyone else is left from the building. They go into a conference room and they start doing table reads and putting the show together kind of on their off hours.
Mm-hmm.
And then the guy who's editing, whose name is Michael Cahill, he was this editor that had this really offbeat timing thing that worked perfectly with the show's tone and kind of set a lot of that weird, awkward silences where it just pans back and forth of them staring at each other.
That's so hard to teach.
And it's the timing of it is so hard, but it
It's
doesn't seem like it
subdivided
would
to
be.
like fractions of a second.
But think about how this had never been done before.
And
really.
they didn't have the same digital techniques we have now.
So he's in a
This is
little
an
tiny
avid-
room editing this stuff together with very basic equipment. Like you said, there was one tape of the Space Ghost source material, and they were editing in VHS and all this video type stuff
and mouth movements.
He's doing all of that
chroma keying
editing
the TV.
like in a copy room.
Yeah.
Because he didn't have any dedicated space because they had no money. Like they didn't have animators, they didn't have any of this stuff.
Dedicated Space Ghosts.
Which, again, to your point, it's why I think the show, part of the reason it was so surreal is because they just didn't have what it would take to do what they could do. If they could do anything, it might not have been surreal.
I would say that's the curse of almost everything that the William Street studio produces, is that it's always got this sweet spot that's usually within the first and second year of production. And then with success comes this sort of corporate oversight and then this sort of marketing plan and everything else. And the show loses what I like as a Gen Xer, as a consumer of that product, and it turns into something that's more mainstream and marketable, and I stop liking it as much. And then,
but you're just being a hipster, Aaron.
Sure, that's fine. I'm being the part of being a hipster that I like. There are aspects of being a hipster that are really off-putting, and I don't like those.
I think that there is something to be said. I'm going to make the analogy of Metallica.
I liked being a hipster till everyone was a hipster.
So Metallica starts out as a kind of garage band, right? They're crunchy and poorly produced and they are not polished or corporate sounding at all, which is perfect for what they're creating.
Mm-hmm.
And then as you move into the 90s, they become very slick and produced and polished, and they lose, for me, like what was resonating. Like when I listen to it and I'm trying to like it, I don't hear the thing in the music that I liked, and I truly don't like it. And so people are like, oh, you're just saying you don't like it because it's popular. I'm like, no, I think it's popular because it's missing this other part, which is the part that I liked.
Which I could use that same argument against the hipster argument for me, but I'm not going to deny that there are situations where I just stop liking things because they're popular. Like it's just an instinct that I have sometimes where I'm like, I'm just tired of how much people like this.
I'm tired of
gonna
hearing
go
about
find
things
something
for
else
sure. Like
to like more.
Yeah.
Um,
There are a lot of things that you do just get tired of hearing about them. But I think in this case, for Space Ghost, I hadn't really seen a lot of the very late seasons
I
of
hadn't
it.
either.
And I was like, this
Especially
is like a
after
foreign thing.
The post first run, you know, a lot of that stuff that they did for Game Tap and other places where they redid seasons and they brought it back, but it was sort of in web episodes and other places.
Yeah, those I just really can't get into. I really prefer
they were really
the first,
shiny. They were really nice looking, but
I'd say the first 3 or 4 years, 3 or 4 seasons of Space Ghost are pretty solid.
Yeah.
They do get increasingly weird.
Yes.
Weird.
Weird.
But yeah, by the time you get to like the 9th season, it's what is happening right now.
How many Space Ghost episodes can you watch back to back before you need a break?
Oh, I can watch a lot.
I went
enough to make Michael leave the room for a long time.
I went 1.5 seasons the other night, just before I realized I had done it. Now, to be fair, the second season was a little shorter and a little stranger as far as their format goes, but
yeah, of note, a lot of the later season episodes are not actually in HBO Max. So if you're watching it there, and we're going to talk about ways that you can watch this show.
Excellent.
But
so where are we on your chart for how the show is progressing?
So I want to talk about really quickly some of the creators. So first,
okay,
I want to talk about Mike Lazzo. So I'm going to pop this slide up on the screen real quick of all of the folks who worked on this. So Mike Lazzo is in the top left corner.
I didn't realize how much I appreciated Mike Lazzo until we did this.
Mike Lazzo is from LaGrange, Georgia, which is a very rural
It's
area.
halfway between two things.
Yep. And he moved around a whole lot as a kid, and it made it hard for him to make friends, according to Wikipedia.
Yeah, right. So grain of salt.
He got really into TV and cartoons because of that, and comic books. And he dropped out of high school at age 15 to work at a movie theater. And I'm going to take this down so that you guys can see us. I know you want to see us.
Hello.
So in 1984, with his, I assume maybe he got his GED. I don't know. God bless him. He started working in shipping and receiving at Turner Broadcasting here in Atlanta. And then he gradually worked his way up through the programming department at Turner. And then he went to the programming block and the animation part of TBS. And he was running the running the department of Turner in the intervening years. And
the department of Turner?
No, wait, I'm sorry. I can't read.
That's okay. I like it if that's a thing.
He went to program TBS's animation block running daily from 4:30 to 6 p.m. until 1993. And then he became the first programmer in Cartoon Network's history. So Cartoon Network was a brand new part of TBS in 1994.
Something about that just feels so good.
So by 94, he was the VP of programming for Cartoon Network.
Yeah. So first of all, stay in school, kids. But to see somebody who makes a bold choice like that, which was a lot more common in the 60s, 70s, and 80s.
Yes.
High school, ending high school back then felt like graduating from college feels now. Like it's just weird how that's leveled up. But he did that to go do something he liked, like working at the movie theater, and then worked his way up to being the VP of the Cartoon Network. And I think that's why they continued for so many years to give projects to people who were working after hours in their garage. He placed bets. And some of the shows that are on the list of things that came out of Willem Street and Cartoon Network after his tenure, some of them are really strange and bizarre, and they didn't resonate with me at all. But I think that they're an example of how he would make bets on strange ideas, strange people, things that didn't fit the corporate mold.
But I feel like in a way he's kind of like and is this the guy's name, Dave Filoni? In the sense that he
has
really,
his own personal vision.
he knows what he's doing. He knows the
Oh,
characters.
okay.
He's not a corporate shill. He actually read comic books, watched cartoons.
Yeah.
He knows who Space Ghost actually is from the original
And
thing. He doesn't
unironically
look down on it.
appreciated him.
He doesn't think that it's stupid and he's just going to manipulate it so he can make a career out of it. He actually likes it on a level and is willing to sort of take chances with it because of that, because he understands it on a level that a
Mhm.
lot of corporate types don't, because this is beneath you. And you feel that like with Disney today, very much. You feel like, oh, well, you know, we're making this content, but we think that superheroes are stupid, or we think that these things
There
are.
is a weird
You
bit
can
of that.
feel that
You sent
when
me an
it's true.
interview with a local TV station where the anchors were going back and forth, and
Yeah.
they were like, "How do they even get guests to interview?" You know, and you're just going, "Oh, come on."
There is a great, yes, to your this
Super
example.
jockey.
It's like
Super jockey.
these Atlanta local news show. It's up on YouTube. I sent it to you.
Yeah.
And it's basically from 1997 or 8.
Mhm.
And the local news station, because of course it's, you know, oh, this is becoming a fad now. This is becoming popular. They did
right
a
here
little
in our own
segment.
backyard,
That's
they're
right.
making a cartoon that everybody seems to like. We don't know why, you know.
Yeah,
and just
it's
sort of-
really stupid. It's kind of the undertone of it. And
and they're in between their laughs. You're hearing, "Well, this is not for me," but it's filling up the time for this segment.
that's right. So I'll post the link in my show notes on that. But that's a fun interview to watch, because it's like they're going into the Cartoon Network studios and sort of interviewing the guys.
There
And
were good nuggets in there.
there were great nuggets, and I wish I could have pulled more of that stuff to put in here, but I didn't.
Nuggets.
I couldn't just choose one or the other. So, all right.
I have a question for you, but I don't know where we are on your map of the future.
I'm gonna really quickly talk about the
Okay.
voice people.
Bear with me. I'll get to my questions.
I'm just going to sort of breeze through these. So up on the top right, you've got Andy Merrill, who does Brak.
I love that shirt he's wearing.
I do, isn't it apropos?
Is that Latin? What kind of guitar is that? Is that a
It's
Gibson?
a ukulele, I believe.
Or what kind of ukulele? Is it a gitalele?
On the bottom left, you've got George Lowe, who does Space Ghost voice.
I like George Lowe.
George Lowe is funny because they couldn't afford Gary Owens, and George Lowe had done some voiceover at TBS, and so he sort of
He
gave.
actually read a part for Radioland Murders that got cut from the movie. So he'd been working in radio for years.
Mhm.
He went in and read those parts, and then Lucas cut them from the film. So he didn't get the credit, but he now is known for having done that.
And then C. Martin Croker, Clay, as the C stands for Clay. He is in the bottom right, and he sadly passed away just a few years ago. But he was this guy who had worked at what's the production company?
Circle K.
Crawford Communications.
Yeah.
And so when they went with Crawford Communications, which was the production company here locally, they decided to use instead of the Hollywood place. Clay was there, and he totally got where they were coming from. And so the other guys who worked on his team were trying to do the same corporate crap. And he was like, no, I get what these guys are trying to do. And so he sort of did an off-the-cuff impersonation of the original Zorak from the original cartoon. And they were like, you're doing the voice. And so that's how he got the voice for Zorak. And he became an integral part of the team, of course, because he did the voices for
He was an
Moltar,
animator
and
to start with,
he
right?
was
Yeah.
not a voice actor initially. But so again, it's someone who knows the characters and who is not.
But there's a lot of that in this, where everybody who's doing a job for this company kind of did something else.
Yeah, he
and
had
then
been an
did
animator,
everything-
like you said, and he,
did the job that they got for the show off the side of their desk. And I
Yeah.
think that they brought the mistakes, but they also brought the fact that they just didn't know how things were done in some cases, right? They did work at a cartoon company, but they brought a lot of that freshness to it, and it made it more authentic.
oh my God. So he had actually gotten his start in animation in the late 80s by doing an animation of the laser show over at Stone Mountain.
Yeah, I saw that.
I was like,
I think I may have even seen
it's
that
stuff
show.
like that, and then hearing them constantly mention Dothan.
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 I think it's Dothan.
It's
Many
Dothan.
Dothans were
Dothan,
killed,
Alabama.
getting us this information.
They were talking about, they constantly referenced Dothan, which was about 40 minutes from where I lived in Alabama.
Mhm.
And I just think it's so trippy.
It's on the way to Panama City.
For them, it would have been, yes. For
Is
me,
that
it
in
was
the
where the mall
Panhandle?
was,
Yes.
So
It's from the
I
show.
do kind of love that. I know.
The hyper localization, and they talked about parts of Georgia. This is well before the Renaissance of filmmaking in Georgia was really happening. So they talk about local Georgia like it's Hollywood. Like they reference
I do
things in
love
their
that.
cartoons, which I appreciated a lot growing up too, because it would be things that were closer to home for me, but they weren't like Malibu or all these places we were used to hearing.
Right. And then of course there was Brak, who was done by Andy Merrill,
Mhm.
who I had a huge crush on. I was so sad that this is Brak and Zorak, of course, on screen. I just had this huge crush on Brak, and I had made out of Fimo clay back in the 90s when I was watching the show religiously, a little figurine of Brak that
Mhm.
sat on my desk for years. I can't find it right now. I'm so bummed. I was going to sit him right here. And I also had this big painting of Brak, which was this painting with his hand, and see where his fingers are. I kind of cut around the fingers, and then I took a photo of me and stuck it in like he was holding it in his hand.
What?
And then I had like a text bubble that was coming out of his mouth that was like, "Melinda is my girlfriend," and I had it hanging on my wall in my apartment.
This is like, instead of like Tiger Beat, this is the stuff that you
That's
did.
right.
Okay.
This is the kind of
I was going to make fun of it. No, I think it's awesome.
So around, I wanted to sort of talk about some of the fun stuff that came out of this. So in 97.
So we're done talking about the animators?
We are.
Okay, we're not.
Oh, okay.
So there is an animator here, and this is something that
Can I put up your word mind map thing?
You can, so people can marvel at the incompleteness of it. But one of the things that in researching this that really caught my attention was there are some other shows that happened post this, namely 12 Ounce Mouse and Aqua Teen Hunger Force, which we talked about earlier. Those actually were the brainchild of two animators. Let me zoom in here for a second. Matt Malero, who is responsible for 12 Ounce Mouse, and Dave Willis, who worked with Matt Malero to produce Aqua Teen Hunger Force. It was just mind-boggling to me to think that all the way back in the very beginning, when Spago
They do call him that in Cartoon Planet.
That's awesome. That the road eventually led there, and there's so many other weird things. You've got animators on here who eventually worked on things like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. One of the animators went on to work on and produce Archer. So and then there's another show, Rick and Morty, that also came from various windy paths from this. So it was interesting.
I can definitely see that influence.
If you haven't checked out the first season of 12 Ounce Mouse, I wanted to make a recommendation to check it out. That is what I was talking about earlier when I said it is a show that will make you feel either like you are on something or you should be, because it's that strange. And they take this sort of non sequitur, weird timing thing to a level that is unhealthy.
Mm-hmm.
And again, like some of the other things with that show, Aqua Teen has this problem too. By season 3 of 12 Ounce Mouse, the production value has gone through the roof. The characters are starting to look like Archer characters. So one of the hallmarks of 12 Ounce Mouse was it was produced on paper that was literally taken off the copy machine. So you can see the scripts of other shows through the animation, like it's on the other side of the page that they drew on. And that is one of the charms of it. And they would hire like local metal bands and stuff to do the beginnings. But they're just, I was curious from you what your favorite sort of residual down the road show that came from Cartoon Planet, the inception of all of this.
So I would say that,
or if you never appreciated anything.
Well, during the original run, there were 2 spinoff series. One was Cartoon Planet,
mm-hmm.
and one was the Brak Show. Now, during the 90s, I think the Brak Show happened much later because I actually wasn't even aware of its existence, weirdly, until much later, like in the aughts.
Yeah, I feel like it took a while for that to.
But Cartoon Planet, I was obsessed with, and that leads nicely into my next slide, which is everyone's favorite Space Ghosts Musical Barbecue CD. And for those of you who have been singing all the songs in the chat, because I know you already were before the show started, I definitely love this CD. And to me, it is a CD that I played in my car on the way to work, as cheesy as it is, as little kid as it is. There's something, I'm sure there are kids that grew up to this as the soundtrack of their youth, but for me, it was like the acid trip of my college years, with Brak's singing stuff like, I have pulled out some of my favorite songs from it. So Don't Touch Me, Smells Like Cartoon Planet, I Love Beans, What Day Is It, I Love You Baby, and the Water Song. All things that I would watch every time it would come on I think it was like Saturday or Sunday mornings. I think it was Sunday morning. It would come on and you'd watch it. And it was just like this weird, great reason to get up even with your hangover and just like kind of sit on the couch eating cereal, watching, kind of like you did with cartoons when you were a kid, but this was
Funny
like a weird
what things
version.
change as you get older and what things don't.
I mean, it's so amazing. So that's probably my favorite. I do know that
so there are probably people out there who are calling out things like Powerpuff Girls and Johnny Bravo, and this is all way down the road. These are all influenced by and part of the same sort of production crew that did that.
Well, so there were in 2000, the show either spun off or directly inspired. There were 4 original cartoons that constituted the Adult Swim comedy block, and those are
Perfect Over.
Harvey Birdman, Attorney at Law, C-Lab 2020, The Brak Show, and Aqua Teen Hunger Force. So that
I was
the
firmly in the top left quadrant. That's where I lived.
Yeah, I was firmly in the bottom right.
C-
I loved
C-Lab 2020.
It was actually C-Lab 2021. I grabbed the wrong graphic, but you guys know what I'm talking about.
Oh, well, we should catch up with them. I mean, it's this year.
I mean, it's one of those. So I think that was probably one of the first ones because it was the exact same thing in a way that they had done with Space Ghost. They took this old show from the 60s, which was C-Lab 2020, and brought it, in and made this weird.
I like how they only went 1 year forward.
My favorite episode of that was when they like kept cloning and going back in time and exploding and then going back again, and they were like slowly mutating more and more each time, and there were multiple versions of them because they were doing this time travel loop, and so all the other versions of them were still all there, and it was mind-blowing. So great. So you loved the Aqua Teen Hunger Force? I did like them, but I didn't watch them a lot.
They also suffer from depends on which season. And more recent stuff just kind of goes weird. I love the first couple of seasons, and that's where I got to watch the 2 animators that I mentioned before, Dave Willis and Matt Malero. Matt Malero. Did I say that wrong? I did that on purpose. I'm paid to do that. I'm paid to say things wrong. But they have a nice little clip on the DVD box set that came for, I think, season 2 or 3 of Aqua Teen Hunger Force, where you have one of them shows up at the other's house. I have no idea if that's totally staged. It's just this nice kind of 1950s, 60s house. I say nice, like it's just brick off the street, kind of brownstone kind of looking thing. And they go up and they do a lot of little vignette bits. They got a cameraman with them, and he's got a little marionette that he's like walking around the house being derpy with. And that's one of the first times that I got to see the people who were behind the animation and writing of this in action. And it was astonishing to me just how like adjacently talented they were. Mm-hmm. So they were doing all these little quirky things to make you laugh on camera. But at one point, Matt, I think it is Matt's house, because he walks over and he picks up an electric guitar that he just doesn't plug in. Mm-hmm. And he just starts shredding the guitar. And that's when I realized all of the guitar bits that are in Aqua Teen Hunger Force, with the exception of things that are credited to the bands, were probably just Matt just shredding the guitar in the thing. And you realize, oh my gosh, they made almost everything that you see on that. And their writing style was really fun too. And they also took breaks to go eat Mexican food, which I thought was really great. You look like you have a thing. Do you have a thing? You have a thing.
Timothy, I saw a text from Timothy on our Facebook chat that we do.
Oh, fancy.
And so I was just worried that there was an issue, but there's not.
Is there an issue?
Nope.
I've started saying issue.
Great. I think that's
Do you need
a
a
great
tissue
choice.
for your issue?
So in terms of, we love hard media, like actual existing.
I'm a big fan of hard media.
Like, what's the word that I'm looking for?
That works. I physical. I think
Physical
people say
media.
physical media
Yes,
instead
physical
of
media.
hard media.
Whatever.
The connotations.
Actual discs.
The connotation.
That you can have in your hand. So
A disc in the hand is worth 2 and
volumes 1 through 5 did come out on DVD. So here's a little bit of interesting trivia. So these are all the 5 box sets that were released.
I love the live action cover. It feels like a 60s album cover.
Well, this is, I don't know if that is Andy Merrill, but he frequently dressed up in that Space Ghost outfit and was on Cartoon Planet wearing it all the time. But these first 3 were very easily available and still are. You can go on eBay and find a whole group of them for like $35. It's not that
I remember
hard.
seeing
Now,
them on the shelf.
The 4th and 5th
Best of Buy
are a different animal. So the 4th and 5th volumes were only made available for purchase through the now defunct Adult Swim online store. And the final 6 episodes of the television run have never had an official release on DVD. Nearly every episode was available at one point through a build your own DVD feature Adult Swim had on its website.
That's too much work.
So the final season really was down to like people only getting stuff on a DVD ROM format. And then that shop was taken down in 2012. And so now you're just, if you want to go and
That's
find,
when we thought the world was going to end.
I couldn't find season 4 here with the white. I couldn't find it online at all, like on eBay, but on the 5th one I found for $300 on eBay.
Oh,
so
just a cool $300.
Yeah, I mean, if you really want it has a lot of the outtakes. That's where that Conan interview came from. They have that entire interview available for watching. They have a bunch of behind the scenes stuff on there. I think there are maybe 13 episodes on there, but then there's all this behind the scenes stuff.
How much avocado toast do I need to stop purchasing so that I can get that $300 DVD?
A lot, I would guess.
I overpay for avocado toast though, so maybe less than you think. I'm optimistic.
So, I want to just sort of quickly do this because it's my favorite. So I just want to have this sound effect anytime I'm awkwardly staring at someone.
Which is 90% of the time. Melinda, how are you feeling today? Melinda, did you remember to wash your car? Melinda, is there enough money in the checking account for me to buy dinner today? You get the idea.
You get the idea. I do love it. If I were doing an actual Space Ghost impression, I would just keep playing it.
Yeah, to the
like
point where
20 minutes.
Okay.
And everyone's like, and I'm not watching this anymore.
Moltar, can we go to the next guest? Zorak is just staring at me.
Can you bring me Lassie?
I'm not finishing that quote. I won't do it.
So
you can't make me.
There is, if you have HBO, which at this point lots of people are getting it just because that's how we have.
Oh, it's like
to watch movies.
They're being like Oprah right now, and you get access, and you get access.
So go check out season 9. I think there's 1 episode of Space Ghost.
I want to make it very clear: we're not telling you
to
do this.
We're not saying it's great, but it's so different. It is so up its own butt. Like it takes the postmodern thing of like we're making fun of, and the guy in the interview you said was like we're making fun of something.
Yes.
Which was kind of the idea from the beginning, but it goes so far into that.
They put too many posts.
That it's just like, I mean, and it's.
I'm trying to work out the math of how they even got the copy for that approved. I'm guessing it never really aired on a network. By that point, it was
Adult Swim.
And I don't think it aired on a network at that point.
Well, it was on, wherever.
Did they actually like put it over, like modulate it into the cable and put it into your TV through a cable box? Okay.
I mean, it was on Adult Swim.
It was a bold
choice.
There's
a lot of stuff on Adult Swim that is not suitable for children.
And that's not the part I'm worried about it. But I think okay, maybe this is another example of the whatever's after postmodern, but things have evolved to the point that we're so used to hearing the way people speak that when we hear something that's even from just a few years ago, and this is intentionally jarring, but like it is
offensive stuff you're talking about?
It is overwhelmingly not the choice that anybody, even if they were being edgy, like even Dave Chappelle would think about some of these things before he said them. Even if he said them, he would have a plan for how to handle that he said them.
Well, it's one of those things where, as upsetting as it often is to go back and watch media of all different types from the past, because the sensibilities were just very different, you have to kind of take it within the context of when it was made. And
Maybe
I know
it's
that
just getting
even then it was probably like not okay, but I'm not going to say what he says, but he says some stuff in there that you're just kind of like, that's a choice, I guess.
Well, and the thing is like I don't want to like poop on things that were of their time, right? Like
Right.
the things look different. That's fine. We say it's of its time and we move on with our lives, unless we need to take some action. But right, I got to leave that door open. But you know, maybe this is just me getting old, but it just seems like it's not been long enough for that parallax to have shifted as far as it has. For me to just be like, how did they do that? Like, how did they even get to say that?
I don't.
And of course, they have Moltar, who I love, and I kind of frequently do the Moltar thing here, where I'm like, you can't do that. You're going to literally get us kicked off the air. Like he's calling it out constantly. That may be sort of how they build a little bit of conscious into it. But it would be, this is where I watch Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee, not because I love the actor who's on it. Yeah, Jerry. I love Dave Chappelle, and I don't love anything more than when these people who do this craft sit there and just talk about how it works.
Yeah.
Like really get into the mechanics of it. And I would love to hear them sit down and sort of dissect the mechanics of how they thought they were writing this show. And I think I need to dig into some of those behind the scenes where they do the table reads, because I think it's there if you go look for it.
It is there. And I just think that that's what I was trying to say before, is people tend to think that when you start hearing stuff about postmodern, it sounds very boring, stiff, and academic.
My brain keeps putting jukebox at the end of that every time you say it.
The reality of somebody creating something that is like that is not academic and dry and boring. It's subversive and, you know, very grassroots, and just people who know what they're doing in their craft. So, you know, you can learn that just from having done it. It's not about going to school somewhere fancy or whatever. It's just about, you know, like you said, if you're a comedian, or if you're an animator, or if you're all these things, you start learning what resonates with an audience and what doesn't, and then you can start playing with that and manipulating it. And I think
that's why I love the Comedians in Cars aspect of it, is because they talk about that instant feedback loop of night after night after night after night, where you try something and you're like instantly faced with the consequence of what you just did. There are some things that drag on. Someone recorded it and it gets put in the newspaper, and then the fire comes at them. But there's a lot of training that comes from like having to look at the person that you're trying to make laugh, and then have them go back and say, I hate you, right? And you just got to deal with it. You got to move through it. And I hear those stories. No, and I realized, as much as I thought being a stand-up comedian might be kind of, no, thank you. That sounds terrible.
Just a big nope.
Turbobabble.
All right. So any last thoughts, Aaron, on Space Ghost Coast to Coast? If someone has never seen it, what would you recommend they do? Like, just
you know what I would like? I would like nothing more than to just climb into a watermelon and make it my home. Watermelons are fantastic. How many watermelons do you think you've eaten in your life?
0.
0 watermelons.
I hate watermelon.
That's an accomplishment. But it might also mean you're a supervillain.
I am.
If I get reincarnated, I want to reincarnate.
What's your superpower, Aaron?
My superpower is that I can turn invisible. And I can roast you with a laser beam.
But only when no one's looking at you.
What's that, Zorak? Yes. Yes.
So I'm going to end the audio version of the podcast. And now I'm going to switch over to reading some of these great super chats that people have sent very kindly. So first one that I see, I finally figured out how to do this. So Laser Pants says, good morning from the West Coast, Melinda and Aaron. Wow, you must have gotten up
good
a little
morning
bit early
from
on a Saturday.
Near the East Coast. Laser Pants.
Bradshaw Studio, thanks for the super sticker.
Oh,
that's super fun.
It's cool.
Vinkman, thank you for the super kind super chat. He says, Aaron, the Aaronest Aaron that ever Aaron, had a very short-lived stint as a late-night TV host. It only lasted 1 episode after the incident with his guest, the planet Jupiter. Aaron still has nightmares about it.
Who set up Jupiter to be my first guest? Everybody knows how I feel about Jupiter. I don't like anything Jovian. It always sort of sneaks up on you.
Wicked Person says, loving the balanced take on postmodernism, X are mocking of everything and getting old fast, or is getting old fast and eventually becoming Kevin Smith. That was our youth. You know, Wicked, you're so right. Like, it was so refreshing in the 90s to sort of feel like we were doing something different and edgy and commenting on all these systems that were in place that we wanted to subvert and, you know, whatever. But after a point, the entropy of that,
just hearing it.
It is exhausting, and it's just destructive. It doesn't actually create. I mean, in this case,
we don't actually want to tear down society.
No, we
That's
just
not the
want to
goal.
like think about things, I think. And
But
I
we
really
want to
think
look at people who take it so seriously, what they do. Like, you know, I do this, and I am the reason society works. We're like, whatever, dude.
I really like
make coffee.
the
Well, you make it well.
middle of where, you know, you've got postmodernism, you've got modernism, you've got postmodernism. Somewhere in the middle is where we probably need to be, and pulling some of the good ideas from all of these movements that are in they're sort of, these things are called, they're like, they define art and literature as well as politics and media, and they sort of have this ripple effect on everything that's in our zeitgeist. I hate to use these big academic words because
I don't like the word zeitgeist, but I like the word zeitgeist because it's got the German word for ghost in it. And we're talking about space ghosts. And oh my gosh, I just realized that people who make coffee might actually hold civilization together just by virtue of providing caffeine and energy for people who need it.
Wicked also says, always hilarious to see Brit comics hosting American award shows and American celebs on Brit talk shows because Brits love to abuse celebrities. That's a good point. Like when you watch even something as mainstream as Graham Norton, he doesn't treat those celebrities. It doesn't feel as staged and like sterile as it does on American late night TV. Is just the absolute bottom of the barrel, in my opinion. Like, it's just.
Do you think that Graham Norton calls his cell phone a gramophone?
Maybe.
I would.
A World Made of Cardboard says, I loved Brak, but how did he become a breakout character to get his own show? Or was that the result of the show Ghost Planet, where they sang funny songs? It's actually Cartoon Planet, and I think it was that. So I love Brak as well.
I also think it has a lot to do with the guy who was doing the voice. I think that he had a lot of character, and so they could see a road forward. I'm doing the Space Ghost. But they could see a path forward. Like they knew there was just a lot in there and they could get a lot out of him, and availability probably factored in. And you're not wrong. The songs were hilarious.
They are. And I mean, I just think that his voice acting really looks so perfect with that character. And it just, like I don't know what it is. It's the dissonance of the voice with that face, and the fact that he kind of looks like a cat. I think it just is sort of like, you know, how the internet is made up of cats.
Yes.
It's sort of like there's part of it I really think that's because he's kind of a cat-like creature. I don't know, but I never really thought that the Brak show, I hate to say this, but I just never thought it was as funny.
You need to get it out.
It wasn't as
say it now and be done.
It wasn't as funny to me as Cartoon Planet, which was made for children. It was made like to introduce actual cartoons that they were running like in the morning when kids are watching TV. But
let me ask you this.
No.
Do you like, can I please ask you this?
Yes.
Thank you. I am the host. Yeah, that's not cool. Do you like salt though? Do you like salt?
Uh-huh.
Would you just eat salt? Or do you need other food to be with the salt?
I do need other food, and I
think
agree.
that's why.
I really agree. Space Ghost, there's a chemistry between Zorak, Space Ghost, and Brak, and I feel like that's kind of it. It would have been extra disruptive to have it on the late night talk show because Brak is so distracting, but he's really annoying, and so to have him as the main character doesn't work to me.
If it's all you hear for 30 solid minutes, it would make me crazy. But he's got like the verbal equivalent of the wacky wavy arms guy it's
Wacky
like
waving inflatable
if
arm
you-
waving tube
if
man.
you like explain what that guy looks like without me being able to see anything, just play something Brak is saying, and that's what's happening in my head. It's just going on.
I love beans. Woo, woo, woo.
know.
I love beans.
He's
How about
so-
you?
He bought into
High
every
in fiber
delivery.
and low in fat. Hey, I bet you didn't know that. Raymond says, "Hi, Melinda and Aaron. Great show. I first saw Space Ghost on the Space Stars cartoon in '81, so I found Space Ghost Coast to Coast hysterically funny. It's sort of like seeing Manos in the theater before the Misty parody. That's a great. We were just talking about Manos Hands of Fate earlier. I
and
had
its
that.
relationship with Misty.
I had that. And yeah, they actually. I loved in the first episode that they had little site references to Mystery Science Theater and Beavis and Butthead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In the episode where
I forgot they were impersonating them.
They were impersonating Beavis and Butthead, and then they later had Mike Judge on the show, who I thought also did a great job on the show.
I meant to go check that one out.
That's
I ended
really
up
good.
looking at the Joel one instead of the Mike Judge one.
Oh, well, the Joel one is also pretty good. But Wicked Person says, didn't have cable or cool friends to lend tapes of Space Ghost when it was first on. I'm afraid we were nuts over Harvey Birdman years later. Yeah, I mean, I think I never
Attorney at Law.
have really seen Harvey Birdman, Attorney at Law, but I feel like in the recesses of my brain, much like the Space Ghost laugh track
Ew.
clip that I played earlier, I feel like they also did that with Harvey Birdman, the original show, where they would play an episode and they had the weird laugh track of like people laughing, clapping, ooh, ah, you know. But I understand the draw of Harvey Birdman clearly. It was just that by that point, I was like, I don't remember where I was in my life at that time.
I had rotated out of the Cartoon Network sort of orbit, and
Yeah.
I came back for
I was
Aqua Teen, but I
more-
bought
yeah.
Aqua Teen on DVD
Mm.
rather than watch it live, so I could just sort of binge watch through it.
A World Made of Cardboard says, we had that CD too. We played it on trips in the car. Our daughters loved it too. Loved Brak too. I once had a beautiful sandwich. Yeah. Somebody left a cake out in the rain. Oh no, I was gonna eat that cake, but now it's all wet and I don't think I want any.
Cakes in the rain.
Can't finish that.
Oh,
Micah says that my
okay.
hair looks great today. Well, thank you, Micah.
Thank you, Moltar.
I appreciate that. Jason says, too late. It is now known as hard media.
I knew it. It's just, I was worried about you guys and
Yeah.
that phrase. I was worried about it.
I was kind of worried about it too.
I was
but
like, wanted to think best.
I like my media extra hard. Firm.
Like tofu.
Scuba Pete says, great chat. Thank you guys. Well, thank you, Scuba Pete.
No, thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, citizen.
Bradford sends another lovely super
I
sticker.
like how it just says super sticker.
Well, yeah, it just says super sticker.
Super sticker.
I'm sure it's great though.
I once had a super sticker. It flew everywhere.
That's terrible.
Thanks. I need better writers.
So I think that may be the end of our super chats.
This is the end of our super chats.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us to talk about Space Ghost today.
Yes, thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us and talk about this animated program.
That's right. And we are now going to go have some delicious Mexican food, I believe, is the plan. I'm super excited about it. And thank you, Douglas. These are fun. And so we are going to be back in 2 weeks' time, same place, to talk about something yet undisclosed. Although I've made a pitch to Aaron, I don't know if he's going to go for it.
We'll see.
We'll see. But in the meantime, stay cool and have a great time. And we love you and we miss you.
She does.
And until next time. Okay, bye.